Good morning, everyone. This is Ramajan and Catherine Carrigan with What is Social Media Today, teaching you how to win the game of social media. Today we have a special guest from the UK, Tim Lewis. And with that, I'm going to send this intro over to Catherine for the real intro.
All right. Well, we want to thank Tim Lewis for being here. And for those of you who are listening, you can go to his website. It is www.beginselfpublishing.com. Now, Tim has a wonderful bio that I think we can all relate to. Tim used to be a software developer team leader at a finance company. But after his wife died in 2011, and unfortunately, she had a stroke in 2009 and became severely disabled. He continued working for a few years, but decided that life was too short to do a job he no longer found interesting. He put in his notice in 2013 and originally intended to look for contract work in information technology. However, in his time off, he read a book called Write, Publish, Repeat by the creators of the Self-Publishing Podcast, and he decided to write and self-publish fiction instead. Now, in the 3 years that have followed, he has self-published 3 time travel novellas, the Time Shock series, and hopefully Tim will share the names of his books with us, and 2 fantasy novels in the Magpies and Magic series. The final part of the Magpies and Magic series is coming out this summer, and he'll be switching into full marketing mode before it's released. So hopefully our team of authors here can help him, because one of the things we've learned is that we win the game of social media together. And when I help Tim, he helps me, and when I help Rama, he helps me, and so on. So we're working together to win the game of social media. Now, he started the Begin Self-Publishing podcast, and he's recorded 90 weekly episodes so far, including interviews with Jay Baer, Mark Schaefer, and Joanna Penn, and a host of other people in marketing and self-publishing. So with that said, I want to introduce Tim and bring him on, and we're very honored to have you. And I asked Tim to share his wisdom with us regarding social media. So you can mute me up now.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Catherine. I think the main thing that I've learned to say that it's my wisdom. Most of the wisdom I've accumulated has actually been from the guests that I've interviewed on the show. I've also been to Social Media Marketing World, which is a fantastic conference every year. I've been to that. This will be my 3rd year going to that. I suppose the main thing I've learned in terms of book launches as regards social media marketing is, I mean, I'm sure this is obvious to your members, but this idea that people can just tweet out a link or put a Facebook post in the broadcasting thing, it just doesn't work. There are still people who try that sort of thing, and there are people who do automate it. Now, the number of authors who will follow you on Twitter, and you'll get an automated message saying, buy my book. And that sort of approach may have worked a few years ago. I mean, this is a great trouble. Everybody needs to be in a community where they keep up on social media, because it's basically not something that's static all the time. So you have to keep up with the latest trends. And a large chunk of it is social. I mean, the clue is in the name, it's social media.
Hey, Tim, can you speak up a little bit? We're having a little problem hearing. I can hear you, but it's a little soft. But I think some of the other guests are having some problems.
Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. I've turned the volume right up on my mixer now, so hopefully that's making it better for people.
Okay.
Can people wave if they can hear me? Otherwise, I'll try and shout a bit more. Oh, actually, yeah, I've got a bit of feedback there. So I say the real trick is that you need to learn how to use social media socially. So what do I mean by this? So, for example, something like Twitter. Twitter is fantastic for making connections with people. So rather than just going onto Twitter and sending out masses of links to people, your best idea is to create things like Twitter lists where you have people that you want to keep an eye on what they're doing. So if you're writing, say, a non-fiction book, then this is a bit easier to do than maybe on fiction. But even with fiction, there are still going to be other authors and people in your area who you could keep on Twitter lists, and you can monitor what they're doing and retweet and respond to them, build up a relationship with other authors and other people who are bloggers in, and maybe YouTubers or podcasters in the space that you're looking at. And basically, you need to start making those connections. It's a long-term process. Now, similarly, I'm obviously a fan of what's called content marketing, which is creating regular content. I've been doing like 90 episodes of the podcast. And like anybody who does a podcast or a blog, you've got to get through this feeling that nobody is listening, because nobody will be listening, or nobody will be reading your blogs for a large period of time. But that doesn't mean that that level of consistency isn't worth doing. Now, I recently started to see sort of an increase in interest and in terms of download figures, and it's just something that takes time. So, for example, this week on my show, I interviewed Mark Schaefer, who's a big person in the marketing world, and he's recently released a book called Known. And that book actually, it really appeals to me because it's this idea that authors need to become known in a particular area before their books will really, really sell. So it's almost like becoming an expert. And this used to be something where people got approached to write books because they were known and an expert. And it used to be you could only do that if you were on television or if you were a local celebrity or something along those lines. But now with all the new media that's available, this is open to anybody, but it is time consuming, and you do have to be consistent in what you produce. You can't just do one blog post every month or so and then stop for a couple of months and then start again. And similarly, you have to be consistent in what you're talking about. And this is somewhere where I've maybe not, with my own books, I've not been consistent in terms of writing. If I kept writing time travel, I think I'd been much more successful than trying to switch to fantasy. But for creative purposes, I was bored with writing time travel, so I wanted to start writing fantasy books. And also having a podcast about self-publishing, while useful for my audience, means that I'm going to be much more likely to be successful writing books in future for more non-fiction based audience, because that's the audience I've built up. So these are things that people can consider. And social media itself is a fantastic way of getting basically your message out to people. So for example, with my podcast, for every episode I do, I look for 3 quotes from the show, and I will take the audio of that and put it on front of a little video and put it onto Instagram. You can have a look at my account at Begin SP Podcast on Instagram. And I also create, using canva.com, a little textual version of each of those quotes. And every day consistently, I post one of those quotes onto that account. Now, it's taken a while, but that account's now got about 1,200 followers and something along those lines. And I only started it about 12 months ago. So just by being consistent on a platform, you can build up a lot of followers. And don't feel that you have to be exciting and new all the time. Even just something as boring as setting quotes up can work, because people expect a certain thing from your accounts. And Instagram as a platform in itself, you're almost better to have separate accounts for what you're interested in. So if you write books about hundreds of different topics, you're probably better to have separate accounts to do with different topics, rather than just one where one day you might write about self-publishing and the next day you might write about your lesbian zombie romance book, for example. You need consistency in your themes and in your account. In terms of Facebook, I've been interviewing a few people about Facebook recently. One of the most interesting was my interview with Holly Homer. Now, she's actually a massive mums blogger. She's got a huge blog about for people with young children. And something she said to me that I think is actually a crucial thing that a lot of us forget on social media is that she looks through the analytics at every single post she does to her page. And then she's looking for which ones perform the best. And those are the ones that she's boosting the posts of. She's not doing what a lot of people do when they think something's not doing very well, so they spend money to try and get over that issue. And similarly, she looks to see, can she post more of that kind of stuff? Can she learn from what she's done, what has been successful? And I think this is true whatever you're doing. You've got to look at all the analytics that are available. And there are lots of analytics on Twitter, Facebook, and even Instagram. Look to see what's successful and think, well, maybe I could do more of that. And that's how you grow. You don't necessarily, you've got to be consistent and you've got to look to see what works and then put more time and effort and do more of that kind of thing. Now, the big thing in social media that I'm not doing and I know I should be doing is more live broadcasts, more Facebook Live, more Instagram Live, possibly Periscope, Twitter Live, whatever it's called now. And I think that is the big opportunity area where people are put off, like me, because they're worried about being self-conscious. But that's probably the easiest place at the moment, if you can get over that. And clearly, everybody here is putting their face on the screen weekly anyway. So I would suggest things like live video is the way to go at the moment. But be consistent, look at the analytics, see what works, and that is the best approach to social media. And also making connections, as I said, coming back to this connections thing. I have been able to make connections with people like 20 or 30 years ago. I would have had no chance at all of having no idea. They would have no chance of knowing who I was. And I've said this to people I know who I used to work with, who I occasionally meet. In the old days, even in a job, you needed to go out drinking or playing golf or doing stuff with people to make those connections. Now you can do it all on social media. You don't need to get massively drunk. You don't need to know how to play golf. You can make connections with people on Twitter and Facebook to some extent. So Facebook's a bit more difficult, but even Facebook groups are fantastic for getting to meet similar interests. And that is the way to use social media, rather than just setting up, finding some program to send 20 million Twitter messages to people. It's making those connections and creating content consistently. That would be what I would say to do with social media marketing. So that's basically what I would say. So if you want to, anybody wants to comment, I'm happy to take questions, or people objecting to what I said, or anything like that.
Tim, thank you for that. You hit a lot of the same points that we've been talking about for the last 6 months. It's very refreshing to hear from another source that, hey, this is how it's done. Yeah. I just wanted to make a couple of comments, and then I'm going to stop the recording and bring up my other computer. One thing that I heard Tim say, and this is really important, gang, is that social media is a long game, okay? When you start out, as Tim mentioned, there's a good chance that no one's going to be reading your blog, no one's going to be tuning into your podcast, and consistency and stick-to-itiveness really comes in at the beginning, because it is like you're out there and you're alone, and then you start to make connections, and you make one connection that gives you a little rocket launch, and you find another connection, and before you know it, you've got things rolling. And consistency is key. I remember Catherine, over the years, we've talked so often, and there was one stretch where Catherine said that she wasn't blogging for 3 or 4 months, and she lost a lot of her momentum as a result and had to kind of kickstart it. I'm going to just stop this recording real quickly and bring up my other laptop. So I'm going to disappear for a second. Catherine, I'm going to unmute you so you can speak to people and while I'm away.
Okay.
So thanks, Tim. This has been What is Social Media Today, teaching you how to win the game of social media with Tim Lewis.